They forget that they're actually running a business and they actually need to do marketing, sales, fundraising, and these other things. Focus on the real core product metrics, which is primarily, I think, in the early days, a function of retention and acquisition. If you change the central idea of a sprint from doing work to identifying what to do and moving a business metric, a lot of behaviors change.
How do you measure success of the outcome from the Vibe sprint?
You need to ask yourself, saying, what's the one feature that my customers just love about my product, and then they're just going to use it every single day.
There are some startups recently, especially with AI, that like breaking records and achieving millions of ARR and things like that in like months, weeks sometimes, which is really amazing. This episode is brought to you by Feedback. Ever feel like your team is cranking out features, but somehow you're still not moving the needle? You're not alone. Most teams get stuck because they're working with shallow feedback instead of real understanding. But when you truly understand your users, you build features that actually move your metrics. Teams using Feedback see their momentum jump by up to 40% when they start understanding users instead of just collecting responses. Feedback asks smarter questions to get you real insights, not just generic responses, so you can finally build features that actually drive results. Move beyond surface-level answers. Get real understanding. Learn more at feedback.co. That's PHEEDBACK.co. Welcome. This is an Hour of Innovation podcast. I'm your host, Vit Lyoshin. Today's guest is Ali Hafizji, founder and CEO of Wednesday Solution, an AI-powered product engineering company. We will dive into what really happens after you ship your MVP and how to avoid the traps that derail most startups on the path to product market fit. We will discuss Ali's Vibe Sprint methodology and how it helps lean teams build smarter, scale faster, and stay focused without burning out. Welcome, Ali. Thank you for joining me today.
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So why don't we start with telling us a little bit of your background and the work that you do today?
Sure. So I run an agency called Wednesday, as you rightly said. We're about 60 people strong, based out of Pune, India, and we are a product engineering agency. But unlike a traditional agency that basically sells other people's time, our unit of doing business is actually a sprint. So we don't sell time, we actually sell a sprint. And as you guys know, a sprint is a certain quantum of work that you do, which means that we are in the business of outcomes. So we will charge our customers for a certain sprint of work, and each sprint starts with, a certain set of backlog items that you will do, and at the end of it, you will finish it. That means if that sprint goes from 1 week to 2, you still get charged the same, which is the difference in this business model, basically. So we're in the business of outcomes. And yeah, that's pretty much what we're doing. We have a lot of focus as of now on working with early stage startups, primarily working with people who have MVP and are now sort of moving in the direction of finding PMF. Which is what our launch service is primarily catering to. So yeah, that's pretty much me and what I'm doing right now at Wednesday.
So let's start with MVP, and since you're dealing with many startups at that stage, what do you think are the most common mistakes people do when they launch MVP?
I think from our perspective, we are seeing certain recurring patterns occur here, and more so now than ever before, because certain patterns that we're seeing happening a lot is, once people find MVP, they typically tend to raise a certain seed round or a pre-seed round. They're a part of an accelerator or something of that sort. These are certain common traits that we see across the different companies or customers that we work with. And what starts to happen is there are certain behaviors that we start seeing across the founders that we work with. And some of the common ones are just focusing on vanity metrics. So what happens at this point, where you have raised a certain seed round, metrics such as, you know, the number of app installs or the number of signups or the amount of traffic coming to my website or the number of PR articles or news releases or media coverage, this starts to become the center of attention, and a lot of conversations within those groups along with the early founding team starts to be about this, which is not a very good sign at that stage. So I think this is a very big red flag, I think, and this is something that one should not really focus on. They should sort of focus on the real core product metrics, which is
Mhm.
primarily, I think, in the early days, a function of retention and acquisition.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I guess people get excited and they think that early success give them opportunity, to go and start spreading the word
Yeah,
and everything. So,
yeah.
yeah. Do you have an example maybe or story from, you don't have to mention customer names or anything, just in general, where the like some founder or maybe yourself nailed MVP launch and everything went successfully? And what was the lesson there?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of stories. So we recently worked with a founder who was sort of in the legal tech space. And because they came from that background, I think they just understood what to build. And with the recent tools that are available with AI, etc., they were able to build something. So they were able to build their MVP by themselves.
Hmm.
And one thing led to another. They were able to get a couple of customers to use them. A couple of legal firms started using them. And this is primarily a product that reduces the repeat work that happens in these legal firms, which may be, let's say, reviewing contracts and lots of other things. So they tackled a few use cases over there. And lo and behold, they were a part of an accelerator later. And what began to actually happen was they did nail their MVP, no doubt about it. They got everything right. They also moved to the next stage. But I feel what happened was, even though they went to the next stage, they continued to exhibit the same behaviors that they were practicing pre-MVP, which is typically when you're pre-MVP, you have no idea if what you're building is going to work. You have a hunch, you have identified a certain gap, which is primarily a problem, usually a problem that you face, and you're sort of the maximum planning that you do is typically for a couple of days. So you build something, you plan it out, and then you go and show it to a couple of. So the cycle time is very, very small. But once you hit MVP, I think it's like a developmental milestone in the journey of an entrepreneur, just the way a
Hmm.
child goes through multiple developmental milestones. It's very important for the child to do different things at that point. And if you don't start doing those things at that point, then that's like a red flag. And it's the same thing in the journey of an entrepreneur. You have to change. You have to now start thinking about different things. So we see that nowadays people get the MVP right quite a lot, but it's just at that developmental milestone where they stop, where they need to change, is where they fail. They continue to behave in the same way, which is not what you should be doing at that point, because I think you must already know this, but as development has gotten slightly easier, what has gotten more difficult is, distribution, marketing, sales, and fundraising. So at that point, your role needs to change to do that. And then you need to sort of figure out how to do
Hmm.
this piece.
Yeah, that makes sense. I see. So let's talk about your methodology of vibe sprints. You mentioned them in the intro. What
Mhm.
exactly are vibe sprints and how different they are from agile sprints that most people know?
Yeah, so I think for that, we'll have to go a little bit into the history of Agile. So
Hmm.
I think you know this as well as me, that software isn't really built sequentially. So typically what happened before was, in the waterfall approach, you would collect the requirements, you would build out a system spec, and then you would go into development, and then like 6 months later, you would build like a certain feature or a product. But by then, the user needs have changed. And to sort of combat that, Agile was created, which is, let's build software in small chunks of time so that it allows for change, right? And these small chunks of time are basically what we call a sprint. And I think this worked phenomenally well, because I think the only problem that it was trying to solve was, you know, um, can we allow for change and move away from a rigid sequential system into a sort of iterative manner of building software? And that worked really well. But I think AI has really changed the game, right? So the idea of Vibe Sprint came about after, I mean, we've been big proponents of using Agile ourselves. But what happened was once, a lot of these AI software development tools sort of came into the market, we would sort of run a sprint with a customer. And then the feedback that we would get from customers is, can't we just do it faster? I'm seeing people build these things in like a day. Can't we just do it faster? So customers automatically became more impatient. And, we picked up our sleeves. We're like, you know what? We're just going to use these tools. So we started using all of these AI tools, and we realized that we were able to finish things a lot more faster. And now there is more time in a sprint. So things started to feel a lot different, with
Mm-hmm.
AI. So the whole idea of Agile is, let's take a small piece of work, divide it into tasks, which are called user stories, and get it done in, let's say, 2 weeks. The idea is to get things done, which means divide it into tasks and get the tasks done. So the entire team structure is also created like that. You have people thinking in tasks. But with AI, because the time to build things becomes lesser, we said that what if people stopped thinking in tasks and started thinking about outcomes? So for example, let's say we are changing the idea of a sprint to finish certain work to, let's find out what's the most pressing need for this business right now, and let's try and change that business metric. For example, let's say we're working with a startup and their goal is to raise a next round of funding in 6 months. What's the most important thing for them right now? Which may be, let's say, increasing retention metrics by 15%. So that means customers need to keep coming back more often. It needs to be more sticky. We need to identify what are these things that make it sticky. So the conversations need to move in the entire team more towards, what do I do? Like, how do I do it? And just doing things, and rather move to to a little bit of strategy to identify what should we do, what are these features that we should build, and the whole team needs to think about it. So if you change the central idea of a sprint from doing work to identifying what to do and moving a business metric, a lot of behaviors change. A lot of behaviors change in the sense that the conversations change. It's no longer about finishing a task, getting my code reviewed, and great, I'm done, check mark. It's not about that. It's about having conversations with the developers, designers, everybody thinking about UX, everybody thinking about what is the most important thing for that user, everybody reading through user research, all of these things, and the whole team starts working towards solving business problems. And we realized that it just didn't feel like Agile anymore. So we called it a Vibe Sprint. So a Vibe Sprint, we think, is still delivering software in small chunks of time. But the way that people behave in a Vibe Sprint is very, very different from what you would typically do in an Agile sprint, which is just about finishing work or finishing a certain set of things.
I see. And then also, do you have any specific, like you mentioned, you're using some AI tools to help you there. Are there any specific ones that you would recommend, or is it just like in general, you're using some like vibe coding tools or like for automation, something? Can you mention a few?
We're doing a lot of things. So we're using AI across the stack. So we do, for a lot of the front end things, we're using Lovable, Cursor, Replit, Bolt for mobile applications. We're using Codex. And we've also integrated these things with GitHub. So it also does the first pass of review right in GitHub. So it's not about just doing faster work or building faster features with like a copilot. It's also about, when you push that, can it also go through a sanity check using AI? We're also using a lot of AI for documentation. There are agents that are available that do that. We're also using a lot of AI for just summarizing things. So simple things like we're thinking about, do we really need a stand-up anymore? Because everything's on a board, it can be summarized and put into Slack, and people can get called out if there are blockers. It's such a simple thing to do. We're rethinking that. We're pretty much doing everything. Even if there's a meeting, it's recorded and it's transcribed and is sort of like logged somewhere so that you can chat with it saying that, hey, was this discussed or no? So yeah, I see AI being used across the stack, from like project management to software development to review to testing to documentation. Across the stack, a lot of time can be saved. I think a team can literally save half their time in a sprint if they just start adopting these things.
Yeah. And then how do you measure success of the outcome from the Vibe sprint? Do you have specific methodology there or tools that you use?
I think we're pretty much looking at, how. So like any agile sprint also, it starts with a goal or a plan. Like, we are going to achieve this, right? Which is pretty much like a backlog of things that we do. And a Vibe sprint starts in a very same way, but that backlog is decided through a discussion about moving a metric, a product metric, or a business metric. So the way that we identify if the sprint is successful is whatever we prioritize needs to be done, and then we need to collect data and see, did it actually change the metric? Are people coming back? Let's say if we're tackling retention, or if we're tackling signups, is it actually leading to additional signups? And that again needs to be sort of looked at in our retrospective and used further to plan ahead.
I see. Okay. So let's move on to the next stage, I guess, which is product market fit. So you have MVP, and then you mentioned above that some teams are just not focused on the right things, or maybe they get stuck. So what do you think are some of the reasons, or maybe you see some patterns why this happens with founders and teams, so we can like break those down and see what we can do about them?
Okay, so this is a very interesting one. Founders, okay, when you have an MVP, you have not really cracked the market. What you have done is you've built like a viable product, and you are just showing it to a few people that you know, and they sort of tend to tell you, yes, no, we like it. And then you look at usage patterns and actually see if they like it or not. That's pretty much it. You have not really cracked marketing. You've not really cracked GTM. You've not really cracked messaging. You've not cracked any of that stuff. I think what founders tend to assume is that because they have these initial users, they have cracked that. So what I've seen happen a lot is, a lot of premature spending. So before identifying, what is the marketing message that is actually working with this audience, whether this audience is even reachable or marketable online, or where do they exist, where do I need to go, they start running campaigns. I've seen that happen a lot. So people start spending money in paid media and start to think that just because I said this to a person I know, if I say the same thing through an online campaign, I'll get results. But it typically does not work. In fact, most of the times, it fails. Any premature scaling in terms of, marketing, distribution, even team building, in fact, has led to like extreme adverse effects, because we've seen founders who've actually created teams and then they're so operationally involved because they need to keep them busy that they forget the big picture. They forget that they're actually running a business and they actually need to do marketing, sales, fundraising, and these other things. That happens too much. Another thing that I see happen a lot is just they tend to become like a feature factory. They're just constantly building new things without actually identifying whether people need it or not. And that can happen a lot. If you get like a few positive signals with your MVP, you tend to think that you know what to do. Um, but I think that's a really big red flag. I tend to tell every customer that we work with that you only need to focus on your core product loop, which basically means what are the number of steps that a user takes to get the value that you promise out of your product. Just focus on that. You need to improve that so that they go and tell other people that they need to use this. Unless you do that, you do not need to build new things or new features that you think is useful. Either they tell you that and you listen to them and you refine that and see if it meets or fits into your business strategy. But until then, you just need to focus on that. But too many people fall for the feature trap. You know,
Mm-hmm.
another one is just vanilla metrics. Signups, app installs, traffic. They just focus so much on that. I've also seen like technical founders, they over focus on tech.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, they obsess about how things are built, scalability, etc. Whereas none of these things matter. It's like you've got like 500 users. So that's also a very big negative. But in their mind, they're probably doing the right thing,
Yeah.
because that's pretty much what they know how to do, and they sort of focus on that. But I think the developmental milestone at an MVP is that you are now a business owner. You are no
Mm-hmm.
longer a technologist. So yeah, I think these are some of the things that I think are huge killers. I think 30% problems that I've read of are team related. The other 30% are all related to overspending, trying to act as though you've already found like the magic pill, and then remaining are miscellaneous. So, like these are the two big buckets.
Yeah, I see. So if some founders listening right now and they may be not realizing any of these things because
Mhm.
they're like you said, right? They deep in the weeds, they day to day building features, focusing on
Yeah.
their own things. Do you have some sort of cheat sheet, if you will, or maybe just red flags that I'm as a founder, if I see those, I should stop immediately and rethink my approach with product market fit?
I think that if you need to ask yourself this question as to, okay, so a couple of interesting tests. So um, you need to ask yourself, saying, what's the one feature that my customers just love about my product, and then they're just going to use it every single day, and I know that they just cannot live without it.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have an answer to that, then you probably need to solve that. Like that's your problem statement. You know. Um, I also think that one really needs to analyze their time. As a founder, if you've got MVP, you're a part of an accelerator, you've probably raised a certain round of money. How operationally involved are you? Are you just like a task machine, just managing and delegating? Because then you are a project manager. You're not really an entrepreneur. You're not building a business. And you'll be surprised to see as to how many people realize that they're actually project managers. They're just delegating and creating new work. But I think they should be more in touch with the market, especially in the early days. It's too soon to take that role. I think these two litmus tests typically tend to give a lot of perspective to people. I think you just need to identify your time and look at the data. How much of your user do you actually know? If you know the answer
Mm-hmm.
to this is the one feature that is going to literally make me capture this entire segment of users for this particular use case. If you don't know that, then you need to probably relook at things.
Okay. And then, so after the MVP, do you have any sort of like this is your first milestone that you achieved? Do you
Mhm.
have a few like distinct milestones after that that you like observed maybe from your clients or you recommend that we can discuss?
I think the most, well, there aren't any like set milestones as such that you can identify, but I
Mm-hmm.
think one really needs to constantly focus on your metrics. So if you look at um, like your metrics, like your acquisition, retention, referral, revenue. Um, if you measure all of these metrics consistently, you need to see an upward trend, which I think is the typical pirate metrics, right? Like your acquisition, activation, retention, referral, and revenue. If you are able to measure these things and get the data on it, typically we say that if you are a B2B product, you need to have about 20 to 30%, retention rate. It needs to be consistent. If you're a B2C app, like if you're direct to consumer, then you can see dips. So let's say you launch and you may see, let's say, day one, 50% open. And we typically look at day one, day 7, and then we look at day 30 rates after every release. So day one, maybe let's say 50%, day 7, maybe 25%, which are good numbers. And then day 30, you still want to be around the 15 to 20%. If that's gone down to 0, then you need to rethink what you just did. We don't know if there was an ROI over there, because consumer apps are very difficult for you to get the customer back to whatever it is that you're offering. B2B, you want a consistent 20 to 30%. So just keep looking at these numbers. The more you obsess over it, I can guarantee you that you will find PMF. At a certain point, you will have identified what your user needs so well, right? That flywheel of them talking about this solution to other people who practice the same craft or are in the same industry is going to happen.
I see. Okay. Are there any time frames people should expect on these experiments and trying to get to product market fit? I know there are some startups recently, especially with AI, that like breaking records and achieving millions of ARR and things like that in like months, weeks sometimes, which is really amazing. But most companies probably not going to be like that. Should founders expect like a year of hard work, or 6 months? Do you have any sort of like expectation?
No, nobody knows the answer to that question. I'd love to say that you'll get it in a month,
Yeah.
but we don't know, I think. But I'll tell you what I do know. The founders who founded sooner compared to the rest are typically founders who identify their role very well. That's what I've seen. I've seen founders who've said that, at this point, I should not be doing tech, or I should not be doing this. I should not be operationally involved because I need to go and keep talking to customers. The people who identify that and play that role have a higher likelihood of getting PMF.
I see.
So I think
that makes sense.
That's the trait. It may be a year, 2 years, a month, a few days. I don't know.
Yeah, it also depends on luck, I guess, how lucky you are.
It does.
If
It does.
Yeah, if you get in the right time to the right people and they can connect you, especially in B2B, right? Getting like 1 or 2 big customers, it can open so many doors right away. Yeah,
Absolutely.
So yeah. All right. So let's talk about teams. So what is the like ideal post MVP team, product team look like in a startup, in your opinion?
The smaller, the better. So for us, a wide sprint it depends on the product and the customer and what we're building. If it's an extremely intelligent application where we're doing a lot of AI, we might like construct the team differently. But in general, what I've seen about, 2 to 3 developers, 1 or 2 designers, and a product manager. So a team of 5 or 4 is more than sufficient to sort of keep iteratively building and cranking things out. But you really want to look for a team that has worked well together. There are far too many issues that happen in early stage startups where they hire people who've never worked together and just assume that they will, and things don't work out. So you want to work with, a team that has probably been there, done that, seen a couple of cycles, or at least hire accordingly in that fashion. Maybe look for that. But yeah, my sense on this is look for a team that, I mean, the team should be small. It's better to have less capacity than more. So you can prioritize better. It'll bring in more focus. I also think that you should make sure that you hire or bring on board any team that is AI native. I mean, we're not in the age where things need to be done manually. There is, even if you consider design, there are enough design systems and libraries that are available that can get you off the ground fairly quickly. You don't need to create a design language at this time. It's too soon. You need to get out there and you need to build on top of what is available, and you need people who are actually in line with that philosophy. You don't want to bring in somebody who believes that you should start from scratch. That's not going to help you. So I think you just look for these behaviors, and if you think about it, the behaviors that I'm sort of talking about are pretty much founder behaviors, right? Like just get things together, get things moving, be okay with chaos, learn how to prioritize, learn how to manage your time well. That's what I think you should look for. I'll give you an example. So one of the things that we look for in engineers is do they actually participate in ideation? So when we are hiring, it's a funny story. So my friend, my co-founder, he always tells engineers that on during the interview, you can use any AI tool that you like. It does not matter. You build with anything. And he'll give them a small application to build, and it'll be a problem statement. It'll be like something like, let's build an application to create a fantasy betting application. And he'll just talk about these business requirements, and he'll see whether the person is sort of asking questions to identify what to build, right? So how is the person going to log in? Is it going to be like a mobile number and an OTP verification? Are there going to be KYC requirements? How is that user flow going to look like? How is the person going to do that? And you'll be surprised, there are some engineers who literally end up spending 45 minutes installing NPM packages and have nothing to show. And there are some engineers who are actually able to build out an entire workflow. And it's the second one that you need during the initial days. Like that's what will help you, So look for that. I think you need a team that has more people like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. You need to have like end-to-end person thinking from idea to launch. Yeah, that makes sense. And then do you have any sort of essential skills you need to have on the team, on the whole product team? And what I mean is like, there's one controversial idea that how soon you should hire a salesperson, for example. Some people have philosophy to wait until later stage when they have like product market fit happen, they have a bunch of customers and they really need to go into hyper growth. But some other people say, no, you have to hire them as soon as possible so they can help you with product market fit and things like that. So are there any like roles or skills if you think are essential before you have product market fit, and which ones are not in your opinion?
I think look, in my opinion, it all depends on, these are all questions that only make sense when you have the entire context. So let's say, for example, you know the entire context of, how much money have they raised. So then I think answering these questions makes things a lot easier. But if you have money just to build product and not enough to go and hire sales and marketing, then you have to do it. But if you do, then I would highly recommend bringing somebody on board who can help out. But you want somebody with a founder mindset, somebody who can sort of thrive in an environment where things are not yet figured out. We don't know what will work. Somebody who can probably do a lot of guerrilla marketing during the initial days to identify what to sell, how to sell, what are the pain points, what should you package this like, etc., rather than somebody who who can probably fit into a more mature environment where there are processes laid out, and then you just have to sort of make sure that you get your numbers right. So I think it depends on the context. If you have the budget, I always say get people on your side. It will help you, but just make sure that they are the right people. That's the toughest thing during the initial
Hmm.
days, because even one wrong person can make or break. You know,
Right.
and we've seen that happen too many times.
Yeah, yeah. It's like they say you're as strong as your weakest person on the team or something like
Absolutely.
that, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. That makes that
yeah,
that's well said.
yeah. And so you mentioned about metrics a little bit. Um,
Hmm.
for the sustainable growth and getting to a product market fit and beyond, have you seen any like patterns or trends? How does it look in terms of growth for team size, for the revenue, for the amount of users and things like that? Maybe we can break it into like B2C and B2B. So it's conceptually different types of businesses.
Yeah, I think for what I really like, it's very difficult to know um, when you've hit PMF. So what I really like is the Sean Ellis test. And what this test talks about is, if you wake up one day and you realize that 40% of your addressable market cannot live without your product, like they depend on it so much, that's when you've reached PMF. So if you think about it, it is a long journey. Some people say even Slack may not have found PMF yet because it's such a huge, like a lot. I mean, their user base could be potentially huge, right? Um, and if you start answering those questions, largely what is important is, I think, your acquisition and retention metrics. If you get these right, you will automatically see an improvement in your referral and other metrics and revenue metrics. But you really want to make sure that you get that right. So if you're a B2B product, you need to try and aim to be above 20. In fact, in the initial days, it should be far more, maybe even 40 to 50%. Because as you grow, your user base increases and that may come down to about 20%. But if you're a B2C company, you want to be upwards of 10% month on month per release. It's extremely difficult. It's extremely difficult to get, B2C customers to come back to your application. I mean, if you just think through your day, there are pretty much 3 or 4 applications that you keep opening up again and again, and the only new addition to that would probably be ChatGPT.
Hmm.
But there isn't anything new in your day to day, and that's the kind of mind share that you're trying to go after. So it's extremely difficult, and you just keep focusing on that. And hopefully, you'll figure it out as to how do you get that attention.
Okay. I feel like we've talked a lot about mistakes and traps and things like that. And I
Mhm.
just want to come back to this really quick and say, what do you think um, some of the like traps that founders may find themselves in when trying to scale quickly? Like what is like top of the list from your experience?
I think it's about. I think it's a race. It's a race against time. So, and time is usually measured in runway. So, if you overspend, so I don't know a single smart person who has not made it, given they had time. And most founders that we work with are really smart people. They know what they're doing. You know, they just need time. They just need more attempts at it. So if you're a founder and if you're listening to this, just buy yourself time. I can guarantee you, if you have that by your side, you will make it. But if you overspend, your clock is ticking. You want more shots. You want to be on the pitch longer. And I think that if you just follow these simple practices and not try and go after vanity metrics or try and reach viral growth from day one and do all of those things, um, you're in a much better place.
Yeah, I think that's important to highlight, right? That like 99% chance that your company is not going to be going viral after a week or two after you
Oh yeah,
launch MVP, right?
Oh
It
yeah.
doesn't happen that often. Most companies don't even like succeed at launch at all. No, like nobody
Yeah.
hears about it, nothing. So I think setting or telling yourself that everything is gonna be hugely successful is a mistake. I agree with that 100%. Like I'm a by training and my job as a project manager, and I always say, hope for the best and plan for the worst. So
Yeah.
I think that's important to remember. Yeah. Okay. So we're almost at the end, and I just have a couple of things to wrap up the
Sure.
conversation with you. So, where do you think product development, engineering is going, and where do you see us in like 3 to 5 years with all the new technologies and tools and everything?
You know, it's funny that you're asking me this question because I was just asked the exact same thing yesterday, and we discussed it at length, in fact. And my sense on this is it's not going anywhere. So I am of the belief that even though like industry stalwarts are talking about replacing engineers with AI agents and things like that, I still think that you need a really smart person who understands systems to actually use these agents. So um, I'm not talking about building an MVP. I think that's pretty easy these days. You can sort of put something together, but I'm talking about post MVP. So I still think that people need to use that, provided the existing engineers say yes to AI and adopt it with open arms and change the way that they do things. They need to, like, you need to now be able to talk business, talk product, think design, and build systems, but not through code or by typing things out, but probably through prompting. Because you're the best
Mhm,
person to actually prompt that. Nobody understands the way a database is structured or needs to be structured better than you. But what you do and what tools you use need to change. So I think we will still need this craft, but I think the way that the craft is practiced will change. And I also have a big thesis about, you know, team sizing. So I think that for the same quantum of work, you may not need so many people.
mhm. Yeah. So,
We'll
so
we'll see. I don't know if that actually plays out, but I have a sense that you may not.
yeah. So basically, the skill of a human engineer will need to be high to manage
Mm,
and administer the AI agents, and also the teams will be smaller. And yeah, that's also funny because I talked to somebody that day, and we discussed how teams will be basically like 2, 3 people managing
mm,
like dozens of different agents that do some certain like tasks, right? Like note
yeah,
taking, for example,
yeah,
or
yeah,
analyzing something, summarizing something, building some
yeah.
reports and things like that. Like when I started my career like 15 years ago, we used to have business analysts on the team.
Yeah,
In the
yeah. I
last like
remember.
5, 7 years, I haven't heard anything about them.
Yeah. Do you
It's
remember?
made.
Do you
Mhm.
remember DBAs? There used to be a role called a DBA, a database administrator. They don't exist anymore.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Well, I work for government agencies, so we still have them
Okay.
we're behind the curve. But yeah, yeah, that's true. Like if you go to LinkedIn or something and or job boards, you rarely see those roles anymore. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's funny. Okay.
A lot of those things, right? Like we used to have, I remember there used to be all kinds of things, right? There were DBAs, and um, I also think that it's going to have a huge impact on like post software development, right? Like testing, security, reliability. It's going to be huge changes over there. There are so many roles there that I
Hmm.
don't know if we need anymore.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, and then the final one is maybe something we haven't talked about, and you
Hmm?
have some piece of advice for founders or engineers, people who have an idea, want to build MVP, go to market with it, things like that. What can you give them as an advice? Can you say them as an advice?
I would say that if you're a founder and you want to, number one, build an MVP, let's say you identified a gap, do it yourself. Um, You can learn everything you need online on YouTube, or like, let's say, listening to podcasts like this. And you can build it out yourself using any of these online or AI tools. Post that, let's say you make it, you need to move up the ladder and either work with a partner or create a team that supports you as you take on the different role of building the business. So you don't need help from day one. You need help when you've actually proven something. So if you're a founder, I think it's time that you learn different AI tools. Use them. That's all you need to get started. But once you've proven something, then change.
Great. Thank you for your time. It was great conversation. I learned a few things from you, and I hope everybody else did. So yeah, Ali, thanks again, and
Thank
we'll
you.
talk again soon.
Thank you. I look forward to it. Thank you.
Bye bye.